So last year, I was standing on a soapbox in Toronto's busiest intersection talking about science. I was one of 12 women to share their work at an event called Soapbox Science, where we were asked to share different scientific topics to a public audience, like the one that makes up Toronto's Yonge and Dundas Square. So yes, tour buses were passing by, musicians were playing on the street, and I was literally standing on a soapbox talking about science. My topic was related to my PhD work, the protein chemistry that makes up the bacteriophage. So in my hand, I held a model I put together with some recycled plastic, hot glue, and some determination. You see, I was determined to share my message about science and also help represent this underrepresented group of women in science. And as people came and went, they asked questions like, what does it do? How many are there? Can it hurt me? And I was excited to share the information because I was excited to talk about my science. In particular, one little girl approached, and she even pulled on the legs of a bacteriophage, and she asked some good questions, and as she walked away, I overheard her say something remarkable, because she said, "Look, Mom, a scientist." And I looked around, and I was like, well, who's she looking at? Me. I was the scientist. This is something I always wanted to be, never really thought I could be, and then finally, I was. That girl learned at age 8 what it had taken me over 25 years to figure out. A scientist isn't a term reserved for someone with 3 degrees, an impeccably high IQ, or a white lab coat, but simply someone with an avid curiosity, the desire to explore, and the aspiration to make the impossible possible. I'm Sasha Weiditch. I'm a PhD candidate at University of Toronto. I do experiments, I teach, I read, and I write. My work is in a field called structural biology, where I aim to characterize the protein components that make up a bacteriophage. And I do this using a technique called nuclear magnetic resonance, or NMR. And bacteriophages are pretty cool because they're viruses that can infect and kill bacteria, especially bacteria that are now becoming what's called antibiotic resistant. So it's a very exciting field, and I'm happy to be working in it. And I'm also an Instagrammer. Yes, you can find me online where I use social media to act as an influencer where I talk about science. And I started doing this to share the work I was doing to more people so it could be more relatable or accessible. And I also thought, well, this could help challenge the stereotypes we have of scientists, those same stereotypes that are somewhat damaging to young students. And like many great discoveries, what happened next was unexpected. Social media really had a positive impact on my academic journey, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. You see, growing up, I always liked science, but I never really thought I could be a scientist, because to me, well, a scientist looks something like this, or this, and if you're female, well, this. And because these really weren't images I could relate to, I really thought, well, how could I be one too? But still, I went on to university to pursue science, but due to grade 10 careers class, I thought, well, the 3 careers I know of are doctor, teacher, lawyer. Doctor has the most to do with science, I'll take that. But it wasn't university that I got the spark, or the catalyst, if you will, when taking what would become my favorite course, 3rd year biochemistry, with my favorite professor. And it keeps going on. I love the way that she talked about these things called proteins, and how they could dictate our lives, and how scientists grapple with the challenge of understanding them. But if we could understand them, what impact could that have on understanding diseases and bettering human health? So off I went to graduate school, where I started much like this comic. At the beginning, I was excited, I was ready, I wanted to do research. But over time, the academic environment really caused my aspirations to grow thin. And it seemed like, well, pepperoni pizza might be the best thing I could hope for. You see, I was met with an environment that I felt was competitive, not collaborative, and I didn't see very many role models I could look up to, especially female role models. And I had no idea what these hours, weeks, months, years of pipetting at the lab bench would lead up to. I didn't know what careers were out there. So I became deflated, discouraged. There were times I'd sit in the parking lot of my car trying to summon the energy to go up to lab. My mantra became, just one more day, just one more day, just one more day. I sought support when I started talking to other students, and I realized that they were feeling the same way too. And I was in fact shocked. In my mind, these were brilliant scientists. How were they feeling that way? Well, I looked for a study, and I found some research that surveyed over 5,700 PhD students. They found that over 55% of these students had sought a career uncertainty as a major concern, and over 45% of these students had sought help for anxiety and depression. This study went on to state exactly how I felt, that we all thought we would pursue a career in academic science, but in fact, we are more akin to football players in the UK getting a professional contract. We had a close to 99% dropout rate. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to do something. I wasn't ready to give up my dream of pursuing a career in science, and I knew I had something to give to the field, even though at this point, I didn't really know what it was. So I started talking to my peers, attending workshops, asking to host my own workshop at the university, interviewing women who were scientists inside and outside the lab, gaining support from my community. And when I found this information, it was like I was on the brink of a discovery. I wanted to share it so I could help other students know what was going on. So I turned to social media. I turned to Instagram. Now, why Instagram? Well, for the past 2 years, I've been acting as a volunteer mentor for high school-age girls who are interested in science. And I saw how their smartphone was, well, not just a phone, but part of their identity, a contact to family and friends, but also a home to a constant influx of information, both good and bad, and mostly kind of questionable. And I thought, well, I saw how these girls used not contact numbers to get in touch, but Instagram handles. And at first this sort of bothered me because I thought, these girls have so much potential, but I don't want them to get hampered by the lack of role models or lose interest in science because of the lack of information about careers in science. So I thought, well, how can I use this platform that has the highest percentage of youth users, the most frequent users daily, and the fastest growth rate to change that? I started sharing in 2,200 characters or less concepts like NMR, protein chemistry, the bacteriophage, why we get a fever, but in everyday language, so it was accessible to everyone. In doing that, I had to go almost back to basics, if you will, and really understand the nuances of my research. I found out that it was exciting, it was valuable, it was relatable. And I also wanted to share the stories of the women in my community I'd met. I called this series Phenomenal Female, a play on words to emphasize that these women were phenomenal, but not always in the stereotypical way we saw a scientist. Yes, some of them were working at the lab, in the hospital, in the museum, even at the field in Toronto's High Park. And some of them were trained as scientists, but were now using science to make sure our banks were investing in better science. Our government was listening to accurate science. Our restaurants were promoting healthy science-based diets. And the more I shared this information, the more I realized I was becoming part of a community online, where young women and men were sharing their research, even using art, music, even comedy. I learned how these people, they didn't fit a stereotypical mold of what a scientist was, and well, I didn't have to either. We were supporting and encouraging, in fact, the diversity amongst scientists. Because of this, my confidence grew. I started to love working in the lab again, and my passion for research was ignited. So this was, and these stories were important to me because I wanted to show my students, the females I mentor, society as a whole, that a scientist isn't defined by a certain subset of people with a certain subset of skills, but in fact encompasses everyone. And all those unique and valuable and diverse perspectives are really what we need to harness to drive the future forward. You see, science isn't done by a single man or woman working alone in a lab, but is really a collaborative effort that only gets better when it's accurately communicated and shared. So, while I was sharing this information online to now thousands, I thought how I was getting better at communicating in my own work, with the females I mentor, with my students. And this was important to me because I saw my students were like me, excited but scared, hopeful but unsure, and I knew that they wouldn't want to continue forward in science if they too had a narrow view of their potential. But I wanted them to see how exciting their work could be, how their unique perspectives could really be an impact that they might not even know about yet. So I thought about how they were studying something like the 20 amino acids. And put up on this slide, it looks maybe like some sticks and some letters and some hexagons. But what about if we thought about it like this? These amino acids come together to make a protein. So this is a 3D structure of a protein. And these same proteins are what reside within you and I, allow our cells to function, our food to be digested, our blood to deliver oxygen. They're quite important. And in fact, these little amino acids are critical to the function of that protein, so that if we modify them in a certain way, or even change where they were in sequence, well, that could be the difference between disease and health. And if you as a scientist were able to help understand that, well, you could have the potential to save someone's life. And I wanted to share this with my students so that they would retain their enthusiasm when doing academic research or working in science got challenging. Because yes, it was challenging. No, it didn't come easy. Yes, it took a lot of time. And yes, it was worth it. One of my most rewarding moments as a graduate student was when one of my students, who was previously one of those excited but scared, hopeful but unsure students, had come up to me about 6 months after the course. And he told me with excitement he was pursuing postgraduate options in science. And he said to me something I don't think I'll forget, because he said to me, "Without your help, I never would have thought I could do it." And I was taken aback because I too am learning how to be a scientist, how to communicate my work so that it is communicated with enthusiasm and accurately so. And I wanted my work not to just live in my lab or in a notebook on my shelf, but really so I could relate to people and help them. And seeing that small spark in my student meant I had in a way done that. And social media had helped me to get there. So this is why I say that social media had made me a better scientist. And while I'm a PhD student trying to make discoveries in my own field, I'm learning a lot about myself along the way. And I have a scientific approach as how we can all sort of do this. So one is to have a hypothesis. So this is your research goal or your question. What are you trying to answer or figure out? Let this guide you and move you forward. For me, I thought, well, if I want to communicate science and help people understand it and also challenge the stereotypes that are associated with it, well, I have to get better at communicating my work so it's engaging and also show how diverse a scientist can be. Two, what are your materials and methods? So these are your skills. And they're a combination of the obvious and the not so obvious. And what we tend to do is relegate the ones that don't fit our defined view of success as useless. But what, in fact, if we thought of them as powerful? Think about how if we all thought the same way and were good at the same thing, how limited our future could be, but how much potential it could have if there was only someone like you. And this doesn't apply to just science, but all fields. Business, music, engineering, art, whatever you're into, whatever you want to do is within you, as long as you learn to harness all the facets that make you, well, you. And lastly, catalyze the reaction. Like an experiment, we have to try. Do the research, collect the data, and fail before we can eventually succeed. You see, I never thought I would be a scientist because of the image I had in my mind. But as I collected the data and did the research, I realized I could be one too. And more importantly, I learned that there were men and women out there acting to make this message widespread, so that the future is becoming a place where we are all enabled to succeed. You see, we need people to say, look, a scientist, not because of what their gender is or what they look like, but what they have to say and what they can contribute to the understanding of this world. Whether it's at a university, top research institute, a museum, in the field, even at Toronto's Yonge and Dundas Square. We have an onus to discover, to never stop asking questions, and to share. We cannot let our ability to do so be dictated by our title, position, gender, or rank. We are all curious. We all have the potential to do better, so we can together catalyze positive change. Thank you.